Hey, how are you? I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. And I want to encourage you for a few minutes from God's Word. Today, from Isaiah chapter number 41, let's read verse 8 through verse 10. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Well, isn't it fun to look at scriptures like this and to realize that God is reminding Israel when this was written, but he's really reminding us today that the Lord doesn't call us to himself because of anything that we have to offer him. It's really never about our greatness. It's always about his greatness. He tells in verse number 9, he said, I took you from the ends of the earth and called you from the farthest corners. He's saying you weren't a great people. You didn't have anything to offer me. And it just reminds us, even in the New Testament, we realize that God doesn't call us because of what we bring to the table. He calls us because he desires intimacy with us, relationship with us. He says, saying to you, you are my servant. And when I read this, I know that in the new covenant, we are both servants and we are sons. We are the children of God. So we're not servants simply, but we do live as servants. And when you're a servant, you realize that you serve the desires of your Lord or your master. And I think this is missed by some of us Bible-believing Christians. He wants us to realize that we're here to serve his will, even as his children. And that allows us to accept that we are his and that we're liberated from having to be in control. And it really goes back to that lie that all began in the garden, that you could be like gods, knowing good and evil. But when he says, you are my servant, then we can release him to be who he is, God, and us to live as his servants, as slaves of righteousness, as the beloved children of God. And then we don't have to be in control. He says, I have chosen you. I always loved these passages. But when I was growing up, I was never really athletic. And especially like in elementary, middle school, I had no coordination. And when everyone was picking teams, you'd be out on the playground and people are picking teams or be captains. And man, I was always the last or second to last to get chosen. And the reason was, listen, I didn't have any athletic skills to bring to whatever team that might be. But you know what I've learned is that God chose me, not because of my abilities or the skills that I might bring to it or the talents that I might have. He chose me. He chose me when I was at my worst, when I had nothing to offer him. And he chose me and he chose you to be his. And then he says, I will not cast you off. Despite all of my failures and all of my weakness, despite all of your failures and all of your weakness, he promises us that he will never leave us nor forsake us. This is the beauty of the new covenant, that he paid such a beautiful price for us, that he would never leave us, never forsake us. He will never cast you off. He says, fear not. I am with you. Listen, we live in days where I've been surprised about how the power of fear can get people doing crazy things, and even seeing how governments will use fear to try and control people. But God says, fear not. I am with you. Listen, I don't know what you're facing. Maybe it's a job loss. Maybe it's illness. Maybe it's reduced hours, troubles in the family. I'm not sure exactly what it might be, but this is what God has to say to you today. Fear not, because he is with you. We remember that when we receive Christ, he comes into our spirit and plants his own spirit in us so that we are partakers of his divine nature. Then he says, be not dismayed, for I am your God. So when we realize he's our God, he's in control, I don't have to be in control. Oh, there is always in us this tendency to want to be in control over our environment and our circumstances and other people. And we have lots of reasons for this, but he's saying, listen, don't be dismayed. Don't be perplexed. You may not understand everything that's going on in your life or have the answers to the whys, but he says, I am your God. I am you, in you. And you don't have to be dismayed. He says, I will strengthen you. Paul reminds us in a very similar way. He says, when we are weak, then we are strong. When we come to the insufficiency of self-sufficiency, we discover the incredible sufficiency of Christ, and he's in us, and he strengthens us. And he says, I will help you. He is more than just a helper. He's life itself. And he wants us to live as people who realize he's living in us to be all for us. When we are weak, he's strong, and he helps us in our every need. And he's an ever-present help. Man, what a great promise. He will live through us. He will guide us. He will direct us. He will teach us. He says, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I'm so grateful that we as a people, have been made righteous, that he became sin for us, that we might be made the very righteousness of God. So friend, as the week goes on, fear not. Don't be dismayed, because he's living in you, and he is your help. And more than just your help, he's your life, and he lives in you, and he will never cast you off. That's great news. If this message has been a blessing to you, send it on to someone. If you're listening on YouTube, hit the like button and share it with someone, or however you get it. I hope you're encouraged. He loves you. I love you too. Have a great day. God bless.